To open this stream, I'd like to begin with reference back to my last two videos uploaded, as they all intimately connect to a greater perspective in regards to the ancient mystery here discussed. Much like all archives of the Hyperborean story, each stream serves as a key of memory that intimately connects to all other streams that eventually pool out into the Arctic waters of the great Hyperborean saga. Synchronistically, within the Year of the Dragon, my soul has been guided to dive into the deeper caverns of the Serpent mystery and how it symbolically plays a central role in the reawakening of the Aryan folk. Since October 7, 2023, the inflammation in the Middle East has instigated a collective great awakening in relation to the Wicked One and its crimes against humanity. This particular stream has to do with the Golden Weave and the Eastern Connection. As a devoted disciple of the Maestro, I am forever immersed within the ancient archives of Amor that he, our beloved Grail guide, has imparted to the pilgrims in war. Most mornings, I arise early for my moments of solitary studies. I typically pick up a script from my Esoteric Egoist collection and, soul-led, I let my intuition guide me to whatever chapter I am divinely called to focus on. On this particular morning, I was led to zero in on Professor Herman Wirth, a Dutch-German historian, a scholar of musicology, ancient religions, myths, and symbols. What I would go on to find would seamlessly link to my dragon studies, further revealing deeper clarity in understanding the earthly tragedy that is linked to the long-forgotten Hyperborean giant tribe and the racial spirit still connected to its modern-day descendants. So, Herman Wirth, I'm going to read to y'all from Wikipedia. It's something you can source yourself. Herman Wirth and the Palästinabuch, which translates to the Book of Palestine. So obviously something that is critical to our understanding in the great conflict that we see intensifying on the world stage. So in Wiki it says that the Palästinabuch, the Book of Palestine, is an allegedly lost manuscript by the German-Dutch historian, founder of the German Ahnenerbe, which its adherents claim would have changed the world if it had not disappeared. So really just sit with that, right? Because we see the inflammation in the Middle East. We see and feel the intensities of the tides. And then we hear something like this, and I think it's impossible to not feel a distinct pang within your heart. It's just something that I think we almost need a moment of silence for, just to mourn the profundity of that great loss. So there's also a connection with Miguel Serrano and Herman Wirth, because Serrano visited Wirth before he died in February 1981. And so I'm just reading this from Wiki. Miguel Serrano connection. Herman Wirth died in February 1981. Sometime before, on the 3rd of September 1979, he was interviewed by the Maestro, who asked him about the Jewish people. The story is told in Serrano's The Ultimate Avatar. It is difficult to know the true origin of this people. In the visit I made to Professor Herman Wirth, founder of the Ahnenerbe, high specialized organism of investigation of the SS, and one of the most extraordinary students of Nordic re-antiquity, I asked him about the Jews. He gave me a strange, unexpected answer. Nomadic people from slaves who lived on the periphery of the great civilization of the Gobi. He continues, I deeply regret not having asked more about this. When I knew him, he was 94 years old and remained agile and alert. Even then, not long before dying, the manuscripts of his work were stolen from him. It is believed by his own collaborators. Marxist infiltrators, or perhaps even Catholics, caused this most valuable work to disappear. The world will never know of it. It is a tragedy as great as the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. At least for me, the identical hand will have committed the same crime to cover up evidence. So it just finishes here by saying that in subsequent publications, Serrano blamed the Great Conspiracy for the loss. Wirth's book would have definitely clarified the true history of the Jews, but the manuscript may now be found in some synagogue or in the subterranean vaults beneath the Vatican. Crazy. According to Serrano, Wirth told him that the Frisian sea kings, survivors of the catastrophe of polar Hyperborea, first met the Jews in northern Africa, where they were known as Golan or Golem. But the Frisians nicknamed them Truiden, Triuweden, Truiden, meaning those who have no truth. Moreover, the Jews then emigrated as parasites on the Hyperborean Aryans after the destruction of the post-Hyperborean civilization of the Gobi Desert, Shambhala. The story plays an important role in Serrano's esoteric egoism, in which the world is heading towards an ultimate combat between the Aryan forces of light and the forces of darkness, embodied in the false ideologies of Judeo-Christianity. So, to further strengthen Miguel Serrano's emphasis on the immense loss of this manuscript of Herman Wirth's The Palästinabuch, I bring your attention to Alexander Dugin. He's a Russian political theorist that I found through this Wikipedia search of Herman Wirth, because he also speaks to the profound loss. He says, and I quote, "There is no line, not a word in the Old Testament that would not succumb to such Hyperborean destruction. It is not a question of criticizing the text. What Wirth did was resacralize, reveal the original Hyperborean gnosis, the true foundation of the Old Testament tradition, free it from biased interpretive models. Unfortunately, now we can only guess about its contents. Already in the 70s, when Wirth almost finished writing it, the only completed edition disappeared without a trace. In the scientist's absence, unknown people entered the house, turned everything upside down, but only took the Palästinabuch. Wirth turned to his students. There were 2 or 3 unfinished copies, but the mysterious strangers had also visited them." And, to really zero in on what Alexander is saying here, it just supports everything we as Serranoists have come to learn through his sacred work, right? And that is the subjugation of the Aryan story through Judeo-Christianity, right? Which is a stolen doctrine. It is a counterfeit copy of the original story. And so, yeah, it was very interesting for me to read that, because I didn't know of this Russian political theorist, but I can definitely understand where he was coming from through this excerpt. That, as I said, really just affirms everything I have learned through the teachings of Maestro Miguel Serrano. And again, I think that all of this is critical knowledge in these confusing times where there is, the inflammation in the Middle East and that which is going on in our cybernetic politics that are now being pushed to the forefront of society. It all connects, you guys. And that's why I think there's going to come a time where people have to reconcile with the esoterics of the world, because that's where the hidden truth lies. So, as I formerly mentioned, during my period of investigating Herman Wirth and the Palästinabuch, I was simultaneusly deeply immersed in my dragon studies, as you know, with my recent 2 videos that I posted. So I was deeply immersed in my dragon studies in connection to the Hyperborean gnosis. I would begin to see how both topics intimately tied to the light of the golden weave. An intuitive pull led me to research Ærth effigies, as I know oftentimes the ancient Aryan has left behind earthworks etched in soil that reveal keys of the greater story. I came upon Ohio's Serpent Mound and was instantly inundated with rich Venusian coding that was glaringly obvious for any true North pilgrim to detect. I came across many videos about Serpent Mound, and upon hearing that it is a serpent effigy located inside a meteor impact, I immediately detected Venusian origins for obvious reasons. As all pilgrims know, the living mythos of Lucifer, the fallen one, and its great impact this symbolic story has made on the whole, and how it distinctly relates to us as Aryans, Hyperboreans. Sure enough, I would then be guided to other sources that mirrored my intuitive confirmation that sensed a Venusian clue within this Ærth effigy located in Peebles, Ohio. So the celestial alignments of the Serpent Mound in relation to the cosmos symbolically display the divine marriage of heaven and earth. So this is the he, she, the El, Ella. This is the morning and evening star. This is the Orphic love story that is directly linked to the Hyperborean Aryan story, right? And so the fact that, this serpent effigy is located inside of a meteor impact, and that its celestial alignments are linked to the cosmos through the display of a divine marriage of heaven and earth. It just is Venusian coded to the core for the true seekers on the path of higher remembrance. And so, again, you're going to see how this all links to the Eastern connection here soon. Just stay with me. So I wrote that the profound fact that this specific effigy is located inside of a meteor impact instantly sparks my blood memory. As Hyperboreans awakening, we are quite literally coded with the fall of Venus, right? This is in our DNA. This is coded within our very being, astrally and physically. We are quite literally coded with the fall of Venus, a story symbolic of a celestial catastrophe of sorts that is linked to this sacred saga in which we live as star descendants of this great tragedy. We know that our story is a love story of he, she elements that create an Orphic divinity, that which was lost. Therefore, the very concept of merging heaven and earth is Aryan, Venusian, Hyperborean to the core. Upon looking up to find if anyone else has linked the correlation between Venus and the Serpent Mound, most excitedly, I found an article written from Kenneth J. Dillon, a scientific and historical researcher. This article would go on to confirm my internal diagnosis, and it will be linked on my Substack for anyone interested in reading it themselves. Dillon writes, and here I quote, "Why should we believe that the Great Serpent Mound was a depiction of the comet Venus before it was tamed by interaction with the Earth and Mars into a planet with a circular orbit and only the vestige of a tail?" Many peoples around the world viewed and depicted the comet Venus as a serpent god because of its tail. The setting of the Great Serpent Mound is a very ancient impact crater and thus was associated with celestial events such as meteorites that may have fallen from Venus. The timing was approximately right. The original construction could have occurred at some time after the first approach of Venus around 2525 BC or soon after the Great Catastrophe of 2200 BC during a particularly close approach. These early dates were before Venus began gradually to turn more spheroid and lose its long double tail. They precede the Adena culture, which began around 1200 to 1000 BC. Subsequent peoples would have refurbished the monument, accounting for some later radiocarbon-dated objects found in it. The appearance and impact of Venus were dramatic, catastrophic, and repeated on a 52-year cycle, leading the builders to wish to propitiate and venerate the god with a massive monument. Building an effigy this size would help the serpent god see it upon future approaches to the earth and hopefully spare his or her devoted worshippers who had constructed it. For the same reason the White Horse of Uffington was made to be fully visible from above. The oval or egg in front of the mouth of the serpent is reminiscent of the oval in the Egyptian headdress, except that it is rotated 90 degrees. This could be explained as representing the orientation of a molten ovoid comet Venus that had been elongated by Jupiter's gravitational pull upon passing the gas giant and that proceeded along the direction of its longer axis like a bullet in its ongoing trajectory. Comet Venus was far larger than other comets, and so its tail was bifurcated, with the central portion blacked out from solar illumination by the body of the comet or planet. This led it to be termed the Bull of Heaven by peoples of the Near East and the Greeks, who viewed the twin tails as the horns of a bull. Poseidon was originally pronounced Bos-Iden, the Bull of Heaven. In the Great Serpent Mound, the jaws of the serpent are opened in a manner that depicts how the portion immediately being the oval or egg was blacked out. Then the twin tails joined together as they trailed farther behind Venus.
19th century observers also reported upon either side of the serpent's head extend two small triangular elevations, 10 or 12 feet over. They are not high, and although too distinct to be overlooked, are yet too much obliterated to be satisfactorily traced. These sound like the twin tails of Venus.
Furthermore, I came across a particular video where an elder would drop some keys on Serpent Mound that served to further deepen my dive within the dragon mystery and its relation to the Hyperborean giants of old. His name is Chief Joseph Riverwind, and straight away he expressed how, though commonly believed to be created by the natives, the Serpent Mound is actually recorded in native stories to be the great earthwork of giants, a truth maintained in oral tradition. This led to deeper discourse within the podcast, where another gentleman on the stream mentioned the migration of the giants, the Nephilim of the Bible, from the Middle East to the Americas. Riverwind, in response, went on to mention how while at a Serpent Mound conference, he came across a man who had a Nephilim lance head founded in the Great Lakes region of the Americas. This man felt called to gift this ancient lance head to Riverwind, who then went on to have the minerals that this ancient weapon was composed of closely examined to determine its origins. Results came back that this lance head was created with minerals that were mined from the Middle East, Turkey to be specific. So again, here's that full circle that I was speaking to. You have these gentlemen talking about the Serpent Mound, the elder who confirmed that this great earth effigy was actually not created by the natives, though commonly believed. It was maintained in their oral traditions that this earth effigy was created by giants, right? This ancient giant race has multiplied through miscegenation, through hybridization, right? Through the original sin where the gods mixed with the daughters of men and impacted all four regions of this reality, right? And so, as has been said by Aryan pilgrims before me, the Aryan race, the Hyperborean race, has now sort of become multicultural in a sense. And that's why there is remnants, there are artifacts, there are excavations that have taken place in all four corners of this world, proving the fact that the Aryan race is far-reaching, right? The spirit of Hyperborea has implanted itself in all regions of this reality. And so this is a key to the reality of that truth found in a lance head that proves that there is a ancient Nephilim, Middle Eastern, and American connection.
Gorselben did not identify the primary characteristics of the Aryan as consisting of physical attributes. Rather, he wrote that the primary characteristics of the Aryans is that they are the ones who will not abuse wealth and power. The Aryan characteristics in connection to God can often be found in those of non-Aryan appearance, while those of Aryan appearance can be devoid of such characteristics. This is in fact because all modern humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, are partially genetic descendants of the Aryan gods. Considering the extensive racial hybridization, many of the Aryan characteristics can be found in non-Aryan bodies. Conversely, not every blonde and blue-eyed mask guarantees an Aryan spirit and an Aryan soul.
So I go on to write that this is all intriguing discovery for any Hyperborean Aryan seeker who is beginning to understand the Eastern connection of the Hyperborean saga. Asia Minor withholds lost memory codes in that it contains the secret of the great Hyperborean migration and exodus. It is a sort of origin point for our great pilgrimage in this physical world, a journey that began after the fall, the Venus catastrophe that led to the original sin, there in the eastern deserts where the gods mixed with the daughters of men. Interestingly, I would go on to pull another memory code from this Serpent Mound stream that I found to be most fascinating considering my recent dives into the greater mystery of Palestina. One of the gentlemen on the stream mentioned how America actually means land of the plumed serpent. As initiates, we know the plumed serpent is Quetzalcoatl, Lucifer, the great father of the north, a Venusian light bearer. I further delved into this information shared and discovered indeed that America's name derives from the Incan Amaruca.
From a website I sourced that a James Pierce researched an article written in the Theosophical Society magazine entitled Lucifer, which gave insight into the word America. He says that the chief god of the Mayan Indians of Central America was Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, which Kukulkan is reminiscent of another sect of Aryans that one immediately hears upon hearing this signature. I don't believe that's a coincidence. All of these names represent the plumed, feathered serpent. In Peru, this god was called Amaru. Amaruca, a word derived from this ancient serpent deity Amaru, is literally translated to land of the plumed serpent. As esoteric eagleists, this is most fascinating as we have been introduced to all of these various signatures, Quetzalcoatl, Kontiki Viracocha, and Kukulkan, understanding through the sacred teachings of Maestro Serrano that all denote the same polar solar Christos, a Luciferic divinity, he who goes by many names throughout the ages, but whose essence remains eternally the same.
What I'm conveying here are messages and notes, symbols that are intricately woven into what Miguel Serrano calls the golden weave, right? And the golden weave holds memory codes that link and sync all beings of the same race, right? Which is a spiritual race. And so in ancient Incan mythology, Amaru is a mythical serpent or dragon, depicted as a huge double-headed serpent that dwells underground and at the bottom of lakes and rivers. Amaru can be seen emerging from a central element in the center of a stepped mountain or pyramid motif in the Gateway of the Sun at Tiwanaku, Bolivia. When illustrated on the religious vessels, Amaru is often seen with bird-like feet and wings, so that it resembles a dragon. Amaru is believed to be capable of transcending boundaries to and from the spiritual realm of the subterranean world. And so this is all, like I said, for any pilgrim on the path, this is steeped in Luciferic wisdom.
In an excerpt found in the 55 Club's The Final Battalion, I read a passage in relation to the Gateway of the Sun. The Gateway of the Sun. It is generally agreed that the carvings at the top represent a calendar. But what's interesting is there are only 290 days on it. This would correspond with the cycles of Venus, always Venus, which spends 290 days as the morning star. It led to an area called the Kalasaya, place of standing stones, which seems to have been a celestial observatory. As we shall see, the morning star and the white gods are inseparable.
Thus far, we can conclude with absolute certainty. The certainty that is gifted when receiving higher intel through a golden stream of synchronicity, that the name America is a code, a cipher, a rather ancient signature for Amaruca, which indeed we have found refers to a serpent deity, a plumed dragon as we see with the Incan serpent deity Amaru. This all further clarifies the truth in regards to the ancient inhabitants of this world, a forgotten people whose sacred story has been suppressed in the amnesia of Kali. And yet despite this and the anti-race's best efforts to eliminate the truth of our folk, we know the morning star and the white gods are inseparable. And in addition, the morning star, the white gods, and the serpent are inseparable. And that somehow, some way, despite the layers of deceit they have left behind keys to this ancient prophecy that is directly linked to our lost memory, leaving behind their imprint within the energetic field of this world as if eternally burned into the blueprint, impossible to entirely eradicate. And so, in addition to all of this coding with Amaru, America, and its link and sync to Quetzalcoatl, Lucifer, the white god of old, there is also an ancient site in Peru that is said to be pre-Incan. It's called Amaru Maru. Little is known about this site, but it's suspected to be a stargate or portal of sorts, a gateway to the gods, they call it. And considering what we just discovered in relation to this cipher Amaru, I highly suspect there is a Hyperborean link here too. So if you want to look into that, that is most interesting. And so, most curiously, I had this dream that came more like a vision while I was as I've been working on this blog. And honestly, I do not have frequent dream recall, right? But when I do, it's always like very prophetic. I awoke from this dream and miraculously recalled it early in the morning, which is unusual. I rarely recall my dreams, but when I do, they are almost always momentous. Later on that same day, I had this inner prompting to listen to Tupac, which is rather strange as it's not like I was an avid listener of his music despite the era I grew up in, where I can vividly recall his massive influence on culture in the 90s. I pulled up his video, Keep Your Head Up, and as I studied his face, I was suddenly perplexed as what I was pulling was an unmistakable Middle Eastern phenotype. As insane as this sounds, considering his Black Panther affiliation and strong allegiance to Black America in general, I dug deeper to find I am not the only person to have suspected this Middle Eastern correlation. I realized this peculiar thought was not so insane when I discovered his full signature, Tupac Amaru Shakur.
Tupac Shakur was born Laisane Parish Crooks and was shortly renamed still in his infancy after Tupac Amaru II, who was a Peruvian revolutionary who led an uprising against the Spanish rule. So regardless of what you think about Tupac the rapper's ethnicity, he was named after a Peruvian revolutionary. A revolutionary who I would go on to discover is intimately connected under the serpentine signature URU to a Hyperborean vestige in the south of the world that seems to be richly woven in ancient Venusian symbolism. In this peculiar case, Tupac led me to Tupac via the golden weave of synchronicity, a weave that would inevitably lead me to the Queen of Sheba.
So, the Peruvian Indian revolutionary Tupac Amaru II was a descendant of the last Inca ruler Tupac Amaru. Tupac Amaru was the great-grandchild, are you ready for it? The great-grandchild of Mama Asolo Koya.
And so the divine lineage goes through the golden weave. Tupac Amaru II was a Peruvian Indian revolutionary, a descendant of the last Inca ruler Tupac Amaru. Tupac Amaru was the great-grandchild of Mama Asolo Koya. And now, as a devoted Serranoist, I immediately registered Mama Asolo Koya as the Mama Asol the maestro often speaks of in all of his scripts, the Queen of Sheba, Princess Papan, the white goddess of the Americas, which we now know actually further translates to the white goddess of the shining serpent. Deeper breakdowns with deeper clarity, deeper weavings pulled from our collective blood memory. In deeper dives, I would go on to confirm Mama Asolo Koya's Hyperborean lineage in her evident mirroring to Miguel Serrano's Mama Asol, as I discovered that in some accounts her father is said to have been Viracocha of Cusco, Peru. Viracocha is the creator god of the pre-Inca and Inca civilizations in the Andes region of South America. He is believed to have created a race of giants from stone before humans. Viracocha, as we know through Serrano's work, is synonymous with Quetzalcoatl, Lucifer, Wotan, etc. The list goes on with the various signatures of the Hyperborean sun gods. Viracocha was the white creator god of the Hyperborean Viras. Vira means hero. This is why men of this lineage were too called Viracochas, and why Miguel Serrano often calls the heroes of Hyperborea Viras. The definition of Cusco from the maestro's scripts define it as the capital of the Inca Empire, navel of the world, central city, Umphalos, distant memory or recollection of the Hyperborean capital Thule, of the Atlantean Poseidon. So clearly we are here accessing archives of Aryan ancestors from the past, from another time, in another round, a lineage displaced in the lies of the time.
As a born Chilean, Miguel Serrano often speaks of the ancient Andes, illuminating this region and its correlation to the great Hyperborean mystery. Amaru, the shining serpent of creation, slithers through all four corners of this world, leaving keys and clues in the heavens and on earth. The serpent mystery is a great symphony, a drama of archetypal masks within a sacred lineage that come age after age within the cyclical theater of the rise and fall. In the Kali Yuga, we forgot our origin. We forgot the widespread impact that our extraterrestrial influence has left on the whole. But we return to remember, and our ancestors indeed guide us from beyond, in hopes to restore within us the sweet memory that has been lost, the golden weave of our Luciferic legacy. May the awakening Hyperborean receiving these words, stretched to see beyond the limits of rationality. Amaru is a code, a frequency, energy that is transmitted through a sacred signature that transforms through the times, but whose essence at the root remains intact in the higher echelons of creation's spiritual design. Amaru is an ancient name that is to be registered as a sort of cryptogram, a coding that delivers to its adepts the meaning behind the meaning. And even more still, because it doesn't just stop there. Amar of Amaru is an anagram for Rama. Rama, by the maestro's definition, is hero of the epic poem of the Ramayana, avatar, guide in Aries, the age of the Lamb, Hyperborean Aryan hero. In other words, another embodiment, avatar of Vishnu, like the noble wolf himself. A light-bearing god of Venus who incarnates age after age, changing skins and names yet remaining always Luciferic in divine essence. Amar is Rama, a Luciferic Venusian archetypal energy that possesses the children of the sun within the ever-turning cycles of exodus and return. A serpentine dragon energy that rises and falls with the drama of the sun and the astral world. If you are a true pilgrim on the path, this is all hitting the high heart. Amar is also reminiscent of Amor. Amor, as you know, is a Hyperborean Aryan cipher that withholds many ancient truths that unlock the mysteries of the blood. A means without, mor means death, so Amor means without death, representing the immortal nature of the Hyperborean Aryan, the twice born. Amor stands for everything opposite to Roma and the evils of the worldwide enemy occupation that would creep into the world by way of religious deception, entirely annihilating the Hyperborean memory and the legacy of Lucifer, Amaru. Moving ever forward with Amaru on the frontier of our minds, let us journey to the east, where I will offer further illumination in regards to this ancient serpent mythos and the Eastern connection. So here's where you really, we're going to come full circle. For this, we will look beyond the lies of the false doctrine of Judea, because although we know the Bible is stolen and therefore inverted material, like Serrano, Wirth, and Alexander Dugin, we must also know there are keys within the deceit that may help us further unlock the Hyperborean mystery. In that, I nudge your attention to the ancient Amorites of the Bible. In the age of Rama, which can also be seen as the age of Abraham, the Amorites, also called the Amaru, were the dominant people in Western Asia. Hence, Syria and Palestine were called by the Babylonians the land of the Amorites. The very name Amorite reveals an origin key to the one whom is listening. Amor, Amorites, hailing from the east, from the land of the Amorah, reminiscent of Amaru. This should click for the Serranoist pilgrim who knows well of the ancient Amorite-Aryan connection. So we just drew the sync between Amaru and Amaruca and its connection to America, the land of the plumed serpent, and all of how this all connects to Lucifer, right? The serpentine dragon entity of the Hyperborean race of eternity. Now I'm suggesting to stretch your perspective to see how this all very possibly connects to the ancient Amorites of the Bible, an ancient pagan giant race, enemy of the enemy, and an occupant, the ancient occupant of Palestine. From my blog, I continue that the current phase of this ancient battle continues on the curtails of an enmity that has been present throughout the ages, an enmity between the anti-race and the ancient tribe of white Hyperborean Aryan giants in Exodus who have diversified within the Kali Yuga's descent into miscegenation and amnesia, mixing the divine blood to such an extent that we struggle to see the origin of truth in these animalistic times. This is precisely why it is a great tragedy to have never had the gift of reading the heisted manuscript of Herman Wirth, the Aryan warrior who pierced through the lies of the Zionized Bible to then surface with a script that I can only intuit based off what the maestro has said would have served to allow us penetration into the true origin of the ancient story in regards to the white giant race of ancient Palestine, the eternal enemy of the anti-seed. So with that said, I'd now like to draw a link between the ancient Amorites of the Bible and the ancient Philistines of the Bible and the Hyperborean Aryan connection between both of these beings. So I quote here from a source online that some scholars claim that the Philistines and Amorites are synonymous, so that the latter expression would include all non-Israelitish inhabitants of Palestine. In the Bible, you will notice that both the Amorites and the Philistines are often comparably referred to as the enemies of God's chosen. I intuit this is a rather apparent indicator of the racial and therefore spiritual parallels between these two ancient giant tribes of times past. Who were the Philistines? Also found on a source online. In the Bible, the Philistines are remembered as an uncircumcised people with advanced technology and a formidable military. The Philistines frequently encroached Israelite territory, which led to some battles, including the famous clash between David, the Israelite, and Goliath, the Philistine. They were condemned for being idol worshippers and soothsayers. In short, Philistines are portrayed quite negatively in the Bible. They lived in the cities of Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron, Gath, and Gaza. Okay, so that's how the Philistines are depicted. But then also, this is a obvious parallel, the Amorites were Israel's enemy for two main reasons. First, they worshipped other gods, right? Worshipping false idols, rather than the one true God. Second, when Israel first requested to pass through Amorite land peacefully, the Amorites refused and attacked them instead. The Amorites' rejection of God and violence towards his chosen people ensured their judgment and downfall. Very telling, right? So on Christianity.com, it says, in the Bible, the Amorites are one of the ancient peoples who inhabited the land of Canaan, the region roughly corresponding to modern-day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and parts of Jordan and Syria. They're frequently mentioned in the Old Testament as inhabitants of the land that the Israelites sought to claim as God promised them. Now let's repeat this because it's very, very telling. They are frequently mentioned in the Old Testament as inhabitants of the land that the Israelites sought to claim as God promised them. You just think about that and think about what is transpiring in the Middle East with great inflammation since 1948. And as has been written by the bloodthirsty monotheistic God of the Chosenites, Yahweh, Jehovah, Satan, in Amos 2:10, right? In Amos 2:10, this is the most telling quotation that I think could possibly be mined from the inverse, perverse Judeo-Christian Bible, where it says, and I quote, "It was I who brought you up from the land of Egypt, and I led you in the wilderness 40 years that you, the kingdom of Israel, might take possession of the land of the Amorites," right? This is a promise that has been written by the bloodthirsty monotheistic God of the Chosenites, right? It is written. This is the promise that these people are wired with, right? It is a possession of their archetype. That archetype being Yahweh, Jehovah, Satan. And so they have no other inclination, no other drive other than to fulfill this prophecy through this promise. And that is at the root of the genocide in Palestine, right? And it doesn't just end there, right? The battle does not, that's just a point of war, right? But they intend for that point to spread out through all four regions of this world, impacting all of us, okay? That is just a vantage point from which they wish to spring on the rest of us in their obsessive desire for total world domination. That in which they blamed a certain someone in history of is that in which they do themselves, depicted here for all to see in the Christian Bible. And so I wrote here that I don't believe there is another line in the overall lie of the Bible that is more telling than that of Amos 2:10, a bold and jarring line that flagrantly announces a God's supposed promise, a promise that would go on to be unashamedly repeated and supported, a promise that possesses the mind of the Prime Minister of Israel's Netanyahu, a twisted promise that leaks into a religious justification for genocide against the inhabitants of the land of the Amorites, the Philistines, Palestinians. All of this because it is the will of the archetype that possesses the collective mind of the enemy, aka the imposter race of the desert. What we have bared witness to in the great atrocity of the nationwide stream of alive genocide is the collective possession of a people who operate under the dominion of a mechanistic machine demon that controls their very existence. As I quote from Miguel Serrano, who puts it so succinctly, when the Jews kill Palestinians, they do so through their archetype, through their demiurge or golem, through their pact with him. They are mere instruments of a myth that they cannot betray. And to summarize, okay, anytime we hear key descriptions such as seafaring, pagan, idol worshippers, gigantic, titanic, height-like cedars, and most telling, enemies of Israel, rest assured we are speaking to a collective of ancient beings who are tethered together through a golden weave of destiny. A Nordic Hyperborean tribe, a tribe to which both the Philistines and Amorites are a part of.
As is stated in Deuteronomy 1:44 and Numbers 14:45, the Amorites and the Amalekites were two ways of referring to the same people. So when Netanyahu said, "You must remember what Amalek has done to you," says our Holy Bible, and we do remember, as he boldly used violent Bible passages to justify the genocide in Gaza, more so than speaking to any specific being, he is speaking to a collective archetype of an ancient people. A racial spirit that, as Jonathan Cahn rightly confirmed, is now resurrecting in the people of Palestine and beyond. A possession that he would describe as an ancient possession, symbolic in the form of a dragon. A resurrection of the ancient Philistine, Amorite, Amalekite, Hyperborean, Aryan, arch enemy of Yahweh Jehovah's chosen people. This concept mirrors Miguel Serrano's take on the possession of the archetype, as these are the hidden forces and spiritual undercurrents that direct the war from beyond this physical world. What's important to highlight here is how the various names of these ancient giant tribes are often used interchangeably. This suggests the same derivation, an ancient sea people of the same racial stock, who again diversified with the original sin, when the gods mixed with the daughters of men. The 12 tribes of Israel is yet again another Zion Khan, as it's another stolen concept of the Hyperborean Aryan story. It is the adulteration of the polar Nordic Hyperborean tribe of 12 that's memory is runically contained in the beloved cryptogram of the Hyperborean race, the Black Sun, the Hidden One. The 12 spokes of the solar wheel represent the 12 archetypal energies of Father, Mother, God, the great pagan pantheon, the true Baphomet, androgyne, the 6 masculine and 6 feminine sacred pairs of Orphic divinity that translated through the fall into physical matter as a prototype that carries on throughout the ages, showing up in the 12 tribes of Israel through the Exodus. The very name Israel itself is a runic signature that is the banner and agency that drives the archetypal mission of the anti-seed. And yet it too is a stolen concept, hijacked from the ancient Hebrews, the ancient Hyperborean giants of the Bible, the Nephilim. When this name is penetrated by the Titan eye that is wired to pierce through all xioplagiary, we see how Israel is actually runic. It is yet another cipher that is decoded in its esoteric dissection. Is-Ra-El. Is for the mother god Isis, Isaias, Ostara. Ra is for the father god, Ra, Rama, or the Amar we have here formally discussed that is directly linked to Lucifer. El is for the Elohim, the angels, the gods, godhood, divine divyas of the Hyperborean race, the El Ella of Orphic divinity. The name Israel would then really mean the gods, the Hyperborean divyas of the Father, Mother, God. This all suggests an Orphic and therefore Hyperborean Aryan origin. Israel is merely a stolen myth from an imposter people who were directed and animated by the monotheistic, genocidal anti-god of time and decay, Yahweh Jehovah Satan, the demiurge, the actual Antichrist.
Going back to a distinction that was made in the Bible in relation to the Philistines when it says that they are remembered as an uncircumcised people with advanced technology. Well, we know that advanced technology is always linked to the Hyperborean Aryan race, right? But I really want to zero in on the uncircumcised people, right? Because there's a lot to dissect here. So circumcision is a Jehovetic ritual, right? And this was something in the Bible that was depicted as something distinct and different, something that separated the Jews from the uncircumcised pagans, right? And so in Manu, page 129,
controlled by the Jehovetic archetype and influenced by the rituals of dark-skinned races with which they have mixed, the Jews impose the sacrifice of circumcision, also symbolizing the cutting or eclipse of the rings of Saturn and his transformation into Yahweh Shaddai, Lord of the icy rings of eternal return. The only form of immortality the Jew possesses. From Saturn shackled comes the day of Saturn, days of Jehovah, skillfully enforced on non-Jews with the English Saturday. The sacrificial rituals include the drinking of the blood of victims as a means of owning their powers, while intending to deprive them of Aryan immortality.
So this excerpt should begin to stir the memory in the blood of the Aryan to further expound upon the great atrocity that is circumcision. Indeed, it is a ritual of Jehovetic order, a sacrifice to the Dark Lord, a symbol of servitude into the rings of time and the cycles of Saturn in his dark form. Father Time, who feeds his children to the graves of entropy. Denying the immortality of the Aryan. Yes, the ritual of circumcision is far deeper than anyone can imagine. The fallen man of the Kali Yuga's first wound in this demiurgic, tortured earth. Now I'd like to draw your attention to yet another Hyperborean marker or indicator. And that is the rare ancient pigment pheomelanin. Now, pheomelanin is the pigment responsible for red hair, right? The red hair that has been found on the giants of old that have been excavated from Peru to China to the Americas. The southern coastal area of Peru, specifically Paracas and Nazca, has evidence that most academics have not looked at, and that is the phenomenon of the existence of pre-Columbian people having red hair. Okay, then you got the Taklamakan mummies. These 3,000-year-old mummies were found in the Taklamakan Desert in China in the late 1980s. They had long, reddish, blonde hair. To further expound upon this, I'll draw your attention to an excerpt from A.H. Sayce, who was a pioneer British Assyriologist and linguist, from his curious book titled The White Race of Ancient Palestine. A.H. Sayce writes, "Last winter I made a journey overland from Jerusalem to Egypt by the ancient way of the Philistines, between Gaza and El Arish, the frontier town of Egypt. It was impossible not to notice the numerous examples of fair-complexioned, red-haired men with whom I met. More particularly, I had an opportunity of examining the present Sheikh of El Arish. Like myself, he was on his way to Egypt, and for 2 successive nights he joined our camel drivers as they sat round their campfire. Time after time, I watched the profile of his face, and time after time I thought that the Amorite chief depicted by Egyptian artists of Ramses III on the walls of Medinet Abu had once more awakened to life. The slightly retreated forehead, the peculiar nose, the pointed beard at the end of the chin were all there in the living Sheikh of El Arish, as they were in the Egyptian portrait of the chief of the Amorites. The Sheikh might have been the model whom the Egyptian artists portrayed. The characteristics of race, when once fixed, are extraordinarily permanent, and it is no more surprising to find the features of the ancient Amorites still surviving in the population of modern Palestine than it is to find that 6,000 years have made no perceptible difference between the Egyptian fella of today and the famous wooden statue of one of his forefathers which adorns the Bolak Museum. If there is still a white race in Palestine, it is because there was a white race there before the days of the Exodus. The united testimony of the Old Testament and the Egyptian monuments shows that this race was known by the name Amorite. It was the aboriginal race which has been destroyed before the Israelites, though their height was like the height of cedars. Here, Sayce just affirmed the Aryan link in Palestine by sharing 2 great indications of a Hyperborean Aryan descent. strengthening the link between this ancient giant tribe of the Bible and Palestine. Red hair, a peculiar nose, and height like the height of cedars. And like Miguel Serrano has said, the ancient Amorites disappeared through the destruction of the impostor race, the self-proclaimed Israelites. It cannot be overstated that this battle is extremely ancient and immeasurably far-reaching, and yet there are clues that can support us on our quest to the restoration of the memory.
To close this stream out, I'd like to guide your attention towards a symbol that always serves as a code that contains the eternal memory of our folk, and that is none other than the sacred swastika, the rune that embodies the Hyperborean saga, from its exodus to its very return. Interesting, is it not, how a video surfaced within the Year of the Dragon called The Friendship Song, with Israeli children who coldly sung of genocide via their robotic impulse, the impulse of their archetype. A verse that struck me as I've been deep in studying the Aryan race and the Eastern Kinnection was when they crooned, "Look, the IDF is crossing the line to annihilate the swastika bearers." One symbol to connect them all. Many know there is a so-called Nazi and Arabian convergence that Khan speaks of, and that in which we see with the conversation between the Grand Mufti and Adolf Hitler. The enemy would go on to call it a natural alliance, as they fight in the same position within the same war against the same enemy. But beyond this natural alliance, I see a golden weave that bonds all beings of the same racial spirit, the spirit of Hyperborea. I see two branches, much like the Amorites and the Philistines, two branches of the same spiritual root, represented by the benevolent yet highly misunderstood dragon that indeed is resurrecting here now in the chaos of the final battalion to claim its inevitable victory.